Looks like we are in. Hi everybody, welcome to today's session of UPSC Buffet by Gallant IAS. So we'll be discussing the economy PYQs. Just like last time, we have discussed 2021. Similarly, we'll be discussing 2022. We'll be discussing on how to solve the question through logic. Then we'll go ahead with the content part. So let's get started. So we'll be mastering the Indian economy through PYQs. The first question, it was like effectively exchange rate. The question of exchange rate was asked, and at first it was a slightly tricky question to answer in the beginning, but there was a clear logic which you could use and to arrive at the answer without even knowing anything about exchange rate. So basic understanding will help you help you to eliminate a lot of options and arrive at the answer. But having the knowledge really helps, because in the coming years this particular topic could be repeatedly asked. So we'll deal with it first logically. Question is, consider the following statements. Okay, an increase in nominal effective exchange rate. One second. Okay. An increase in nominal effective exchange rate indicates appreciation of rupee. Okay. So what does that mean? Meaning that increasing exchange rate indicating appreciation of rupee. Makes sense actually. The only thing is whether this nominal means indicating appreciation of rupee or not. That's the only thing we need to know. But increasing in effective exchange rate meaning that rupee is appreciating. Meaning if rupee was 80 rupees for $1, then the rupee appreciation meaning rupee becomes 75, meaning we will get lesser rupee for a single dollar. So rupee is appreciating. Okay, it's a kind of makes sense. An increase in real effective exchange rate indicates an improvement in trade competitiveness. We know that trade competitiveness and appreciation of rupee is inversely linked, meaning that if rupee gets more valued or appreciates, the trade competitiveness actually decreases. That's a basic thing. So without actually knowing about near or real, we with the basic understanding that increasing in value, that is appreciation of rupee or any currency for that matter, actually reduces the trade competitiveness in a basic form. Meaning that if the rupee gets more expensive, then the importers will feel, those who are importing from India will make them the goods will be more premium, will be less cheaper for them to import. So the competitiveness reduces. So this outright seems like a wrong statement, because real effective exchange rate indicates an improvement in trade competitiveness. This is slightly counter logical to our understanding, because trade competitiveness and appreciation are actually counter related or inversely proportional. So let's keep that aside. An increase in trend in domestic inflation relative to inflation in other countries is likely to cause an increasing divergence between year and year. This particular statement actually needs a little more understanding, and in the actual examination hall this will be slightly difficult to decipher because of the length of the question, length of the statement, as well as the technicality given. That is, domestic inflation relative to inflation in other countries is likely to cause an increasing divergence between year and year. So in the actual examination, this was the most difficult part to decipher, but given the arrangement of options, it was actually easier to arrive at the answer, because if in near indicating appreciation of rupee, that makes perfect sense. So we can take that statement as right, meaning we can eliminate this. So 1 A, C, D will be right. Eliminating 2 will be we will be straight away arriving at 2 and 3, or it's actually eliminating 2 will give you the answer right away. That's in itself is the answer actually. So it's C. So you don't have to look any further. That real effective exchange rate indicates improvement in trade competitiveness. No, it doesn't. So that's eliminating 2 itself gives you the answer. So no need to think much about it, and that's how we arrive at the answer. The only complication here is that whether this exchange rate actually indicates appreciation of rupee. The only fact, like sometimes you might get a confusion that if increase in effective exchange rate meaning that the rupee is appreciating or depreciating. That's the only thing that can get slightly confusing, because you can think that okay, appreciation of rupee can mean reduction of its value or increasing the value, things like that. But basically it's that, like increase in the exchange rate meaning appreciation only. So that's the only thing you need to know about this, and we'll be dealing with the near and near in the next session. So yeah, what is effective exchange rates? So increasing in exchange rate meaning the domestic currency becomes cheaper and vice versa. Okay, that's the basic thing. Meaning that this is actually opposite. Increase in exchange rate actually means the domestic currency become expensive. It's actually not this. Becomes expensive and vice versa. So what is near? It's a weighted average of country's exchange rate with its major trading partners without adjusting for inflation. Just like anything that is nominal, in most cases, if you say nominal GDP, real GDP, nominal means the actual value or the current value without any adjustment for inflation or anything. In generally, nominal means unadjusted to inflation. So the same way, real effective exchange rate means near adjusted to inflation differences, because roughly taking the value doesn't give you the full picture. It gives you the current picture. So in order to address or to identify the actual purchasing power, we need to adjust the near value to a inflation, GDP deflator or a deflator, so as to get to the real value of the exchange rate. So that's what rear does. So near adjusted to inflation is rear, which means that if there is an inflation variation between the countries, the divergence between near and rear will be high. That's exactly what is being asked in this statement. See, increase in trend in domestic inflation relative to inflation in other countries is likely to cause an increase in divergence. Yeah, that's basic. For example, if a domestic current in India, we are having higher inflation compared to other countries, and the exchange rate will have an impact on that. So near and rear will be having a divergence, because the inflation accounting on the rear can reduce the value. At the same time, the current near value will be higher. So there will be a divergence between near and rear. If the inflation relative inflation, that's inflation in our domestic country with respect to the country outside, is higher, there will be a divergence between near and rear. Don't overcomplicate these sort of statements or concepts. It's very simple. Increase in exchange rate meaning appreciation of rupee, basically rupee or any currency. Okay, that's the thing. Just I've made a table to make it easier for you to remember. Near non-adjusted for inflation, yeah, it's adjusted for inflation, and shows rupee's simple exchange rate strength, meaning the current market strength. Okay, it's very fluctuating. It can change within days, weeks, or even hours. So it doesn't really make much sense, but we need that data so as to account it for real. So that's basic exchange rate. But real actually accounts for the real competitiveness, accounting for inflation and the real purchasing power the rupee holds in case of rupee. So it's useful for short-term currency movements, and the other one is actually for export-import competitiveness. So it's basically meaning near is a less suitable indicator for export competitiveness, and rear is a better suited indicator for trade competitiveness. But decrease in rear actually indicates improvement in trade competitiveness. That's the thing. Okay, I hope you understand. Moving on. Next question. This is a classic question that UPSC was asking and is asking and will ask. So master this thing. G securities and inflation. Okay, it's a very simple thing, and just get it right away, right now itself. Okay. So if inflation is too high, Reserve Bank of India is likely to buy government securities. So if inflation is high, RBI is going to do something with government securities, and there are only two options. It's like either it's going to buy the securities or it's going to sell the securities. And if you know that, what effect buying securities means, meaning that RBI has got G securities, meaning they are government bonds, they are issuing that bond in return of money. So if they are issuing government securities, Reserve Bank of is likely to, not issuing, they have issued the securities and they are selling security, meaning that RBI is selling government securities to the market in a competitive price, meaning that competitive coupon rate, meaning that buyers will be buying the bonds. In return of that, what they will be giving? They will be giving their money in return, meaning that by selling those government bonds, RBI is taking money from the people as in from market. It could be retailers or others. So selling the government security meaning RBI is taking the money. RBI gives the bond, takes the money. On the other hand, if RBI is buying the government security, meaning that in the first place, those who are holding the government securities, RBI is buying the government security from them, then RBI has to give something in return. Obviously, that will be the bond amount or the maturity amount, and RBI will be giving the money. So buying of government security meaning infusing money, and selling of government security meaning taking money. So basic thing. Selling of government security absorbs liquidity from the market. Buying of government security infuse liquidity into the market. So that's the basic thing. Then obviously that's a wrong statement because inflation is too high. RBI is likely to sell. Obviously, if it buys government security, the inflation gets even more higher because meaning that RBI is pumping in more money. So it's counterproductive. So this is wrong. So obviously we'll be arriving at the answer. But we can actually look for the other statements. If the rupee is rapidly depreciating, RBI is likely to sell dollars in the market. Think about how that works. For example, if the value of rupee is sliding, meaning that rupee is getting very cheaper. Okay, for example, if it was 80 rupees today, tomorrow it becomes 82, then 83, then 84, etc. Meaning that rupee is getting very cheaper compared to dollars. Dollars, or basically we are using dollars as a standard, so that's why I'm saying dollars. It could be any currency, but dollars is the gold standard that we are using. So if the rupee is rapidly depreciating, meaning that the value of rupee is getting down. Value of rupee is going down, meaning that 80 rupees becomes 81, 82, 83. Remember that. Okay. Value of rupee in exchange rate going down, meaning that $1 can get more rupees. So that's it. So in that case, in that scenario, RBI will be having RBI will obviously be having forex reserves, and in terms of gold and in terms of dollars mostly, and other currencies as well. So in that scenario, RBI will be doing one thing. RBI tries to influence the market by selling dollars. That means the dollars in the market will RBI tries to increase the increase the amount of dollar in the market, meaning that dollar becomes cheaper. Okay, do you get the idea? So if the rupee is depreciating against the dollar, RBI will do one thing. RBI will pump the dollars into the market, meaning that the dollars in the market will go high. And if there is more dollars in the market, the value of dollar itself reduces. Thereby, it can actually reduce the slowdown of rupee against dollar. This is not very rapid or very very instantaneous action. RBI is doing it in stage wise, so as to without actually losing the precious reserves, but it wants to control the sliding of rupee. It does sell dollars in the market. On the other hand, if RBI wants to actually devalue to make the export competitiveness of the rupee high, RBI will be buying dollars from the market. If more dollars are bought by RBI and there will be less dollars in the market, the value of dollar goes high, thereby value of rupee in comparison goes down, and thereby the competitiveness increases. The two actions can be done. RBI can buy and sell dollars. If rupee is depreciating, RBI will be selling dollars. Then, if interest rates in USA or European Union were to fall, it is likely to induce RBI to buy dollars. Yeah, that's true, because dollars are like a very valuable resource for our forex. So, if interest rates in European Union or USA where major trade occurs in euro and dollars, we can easily exchange them. So, if dollars are actually cheaply available, what will we do? If a good that is precious to us, if gold gets cheaper, we'll try to buy more dollars, buy more gold. Same way, if dollar gets cheaper, that's the thing. If interest rates in USA is were to fall, meaning that dollar is getting cheaper, so RBI will buy dollars, obviously, because it has got a later use, and this is a very solid currency to have in our forex reserve. So this is also true. So that's how we arrive at the answer. You don't need to know about that in this particular question, but you need to know the concept. Why RBI is selling dollars and why RBI would buy dollars. And why RBI would buy dollars in case of rupee appreciation as well as depreciation. Make that point very clear. Infusing dollars into the market by the RBI can help reduce the slide of rupee or price fall of rupee. That's the basic thing. And if RBI is selling the dollars into the market, rupee slide will reduce. And if RBI is buying more dollars, it can actually cause devaluation of currency or increase of exchange rate of Indian currency. So that's the basic thing. Keep that concept very clear. More importantly, keep this concept very clear. This is very simple, but we tended to mark it wrong in the examination. This is a very common mistake from everybody. We will be doing multiple PYQs, multiple test series, but this simple question will be marked wrong because we'll get confused whether it's buying government security or selling. It's very simple. Okay, then what? The next question is, what are the advantages of inflation indexed bonds? Just what? First step, decipher or try to deconstruct the keyword. inflation indexed bonds, meaning that the bonds are inflation indexed, meaning adjusted to inflation. So what could be done? Bonds pay a coupon rate. Usually that's how the bond holders make money, or that's how it becomes a financial instrument. And if it's inflation indexed, what happens? Meaning that if a 100 rupee bond is being issued by the government or whoever, mostly it's government only. So if government bond, then if it's inflation adjusted, meaning that the coupon rate, the coupon rate on that bonds will be higher or will be fluctuating based on the inflation level, so that the buyer actually gets a security against higher inflation. Let's make it very simple. If a bond holder is holding 100 rupee bond, and I'm not talking about treasury bills, that doesn't have any coupon rate or anything, but I'm talking about the general bonds. So if a buyer is buying a bond worth 100 rupees and the value of 100 rupees is actually reducing each year, and after 5 years the 100 rupee he or she has invested will be worth 50 rupees only. The value will be 100, but the worth will be 50 rupees because the price of other things goes up. But in case of an inflation indexed bond, to compensate for that, the coupon rate or an additional rate will be provided so as to counter or to annul the damages done by the rising inflation. So that's one way the bondholder can have a relatively risk-free investment, because they don't have to worry about the inflation, because the coupon rate or this additional indexation provides the security against inflation. So that's the basic idea about inflation indexed bonds. And so, we'll look at it. Government can reduce the coupon rates on its borrowing by way of IIB. This can get slightly confusing, as in if the bonds are inflation indexed, how can the coupon rates on its borrowing be reduced? First of all, since I have always told you that risk reward is directly proportional. If a bond is inflation indexed, obviously the coupon rates will be relatively lesser than the conventional bond or bonds with similar ratings. So government can actually have a reduced coupon rate for inflation indexed bonds. Also, government has a leverage over the inflation level, meaning that they effectively can control the inflation and thereby reduce the amount that they are supposed to pay the bondholders. So government has got two things. Coupon rates on inflation index bonds are relatively lesser compared to similar rated bonds. Also, government has a control over inflation. Basically, government can control inflation. Actually, it's monetary policy, but effectively government has control over it. So government can reduce the coupon rates. It's not that government will or should. It's a possibility. Yeah, it's a very clear possibility. That is true. IIBs provide protection to the investors from uncertainty regarding inflation. That's exactly the purpose of this bond. So that's true. Interest received as well as capital gains on IIBs are not taxable. Basically, these are all investments. Whether or not the gains that they've made are inflation index or issued by government or anything, there will be taxes. That's basic knowledge. You don't have to go to the specifics or anything. As far as I know, the small savings schemes are the ones that are got tax deductions. That too only up to 1.5 lakh limit. So this particular statement, that is interest as a capital as well as capital gains interest are not taxable, seems like a very far-fetched statement, because at most government will be providing tax deductions, not completely tax free. So there will be tax deduction with an upper limit. Currently it's for the small saving schemes at 1.5 lakh, if I am not wrong. I don't know if that has changed. So this is an extreme statement and this is extremely impractical. So if government is not taxing somebody in this inflation index bond, that completely goes against the rule of investment or anything. They are making money, of course they are getting profited. Government is borrowing from them, that's true, but that doesn't make it tax free. So this is wrong. This is the only idea you actually needed to solve this question, because you won't be reading much about inflation indexed bonds or anything, and this coupon rates and its borrowing is slightly on the conceptual side and not many will be knowing. But this is something that everybody should know, that the government is not giving much any tax deduction outright, or there will be some ceiling limits, and of course there will be some sort of deduction, subsidies or subduction for that, but entirely non-taxable tax-free nature of interest as well as capital is like very impractical. The only area where government is providing is tax saving schemes, and that too will have some upper limit. So that's wrong, and we'll arrive at the answer as A. So moving on, next question. Yeah, I'll explain few of these things. Basically, I just said inflation index bonds are government bonds where principal or interest are protected from inflation. As in, the principal and interest are protected from inflation. So just like I gave you the example, 100 rupee, if inflation rises, it become 5 years later, the value of it becomes just 50 rupees, meaning that the value reduced. Even though the 100 rupee bond holder holds 100 rupee, the value of that becomes roughly around 50 rupees. So they provide an interest rate in such a way that it is inflation adjusted, so that the bondholder will be getting an amount, say for 150 or something, so that the effective value of the 100 rupee is preserved. Okay, so that's it. Basically, it's a security. It provides security, reduce risk for the bondholder. So to promote further investments in G securities or government bonds, inflation index bonds, so that government can raise money. That's basically it. Then actually, this is also one thing. Government is using inflation index bonds to reduce attraction towards gold, because if people are buying gold and it will be sitting idle at their homes, and if they will be using it or anything, but that's not doing any actual economic purpose. Government is trying to woo those buyers of gold, because people buy gold because gold actually is like an investment. Its price rises and it can beat inflation. So in order to attract those customers, which India has a lot, so government can actually issue these inflation index bond that could provide similar benefits, and government can actually borrow from them and use that money to make up, to invest in the economy. So that's one way inflation index bond are used, and this has been used in this 2013 actually. And the types of bonds, this is not very important, but just understand. Capital index bond mean that only principal is adjusted, not interest. Inflation index, national saving securities. These are like small saving schemes where both principal and interests are linked to inflation, and obviously we'll be using CPI, consumer price index, as the inflation measure. So that's the basic thing you need to know. These are tiny details which might come handy, but just go through this. Okay, there are bonds, inflation index bonds, where only principal is adjusted to inflation, and there are bonds where both principal and interest are adjusted to inflation, and CPI is the inflation targeting measure. Which of the following activities constitute real sector in economy? Those who have read the basic economy books will get this right away. For somebody like me, it was slightly tricky, because I couldn't really get to this, what was the real sector and all. Actually, it was a very simple concept. Farmer harvesting their crops, textile mills converting, commercial bank lending, corporate body issuing bonds. Considering these four options, we actually know that these two are very similar, because they are one is a primary sector and the second one is a secondary sector, and there are actual production of something, as in an output is there, a physical output is being produced in these two scenarios. Or in this case, it's just movement of money is happening, as in no real product is being produced or any real thing is done. It's just movement of money. That's it. A corporate body issuing bonds, basically it's movement of money. So clubbing those things, we can say that if 1 is 2, then 2 should also be there. So in options that are having 1 and 2, we without 1 and 2 together, we can eliminate them. So we'll be arriving at 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Here is another challenge, as in these two are actually very similar. So if any of them is not there, like either 3 is not there, then 4 shouldn't be there, because they are both very similar, because they are not producing anything or they are not giving any physical output as such. So either way, we can eliminate that also. That's also another logic, because if 3 is not there, then 4 should also be not there, meaning that options with 3 and 4 can be eliminated. So that's another way to solve this question and arrive at the answer. So basically it's A. What's the real sector? It's real sector refers to the part of the economy involved in producing actual goods, things you can touch, use or consume, things like that. It's opposite to financial sector, because there is no real production of goods. It's just transfer of money, interest, things like that are happening. There is no real product as such. So that's it. So that's basically two major sectors, real sector and financial sector. It's very easy concept. Just understand that. See, UPSC is asking such questions every year. Also, UPSC will be asking similar questions like what's a capital good, what's a consumer good, things like that. It's very easy. Just go through the PYQs and you will be able to answer it. Then this one is slightly on the trickier side, because it was very difficult to decipher this particular one because I couldn't get any logic in the actual examination hall. So I think I left this question. So but this is not something that you shouldn't be leaving because it was widely talked in the current affairs and it had a multiple references, but I missed it. But I'm saying again, there will be questions which others might be marking right and you won't be able to answer it, but it's fine. Just develop a logic, be confident, and try to mark, have enough number of attempts within your, considering your accuracy range, so that you don't have to worry much. If you hit that target based on your accuracy, it may be 80 for some people who are very accurate and 90 plus for most aspirants, including myself. So if you hit that target and if you are, if you have to eliminate or you not attend or leave some questions, it's fine. Don't worry. You'll be clearing it. No issues. So what are indirect transfers? An Indian company investing in foreign enterprise paying tax to a foreign company on profits arising out of its investment. This is mostly like profit shifting. This sounds like profit shifting. Okay. And a foreign company investing in India and paying tax to the country of its base. This is basically base erosion and profit shifting. Okay. This is base erosion, profit shifting. So that's not indirect transfers. An Indian company purchases tangible assets in foreign country and sells such assets after their value increases and transfers the proceeds to India. Okay. This kind of makes sense because Indian companies purchasing tangible assets in foreign country and sell such assets after their value increases and then transfers. This is kind of right, but it will be mostly like indirect transfers, or it wouldn't be called an indirect transfer per se. This is something else. Anyways, I'm able to eliminate these two based on this is like profit shifting. This is not indirect transfers anyway. So, but I haven't heard about this particular concept or what this actually means. Then a foreign company transfers shares and such shares derive their substantial value from assets located in India. Okay. Here there is a transfer happening, first of all, and the transfer of shares is happening, and such transfers and such shares actually derive their substantial value from assets located in India, meaning that the assets are not directly sold or anything, but the shares of those assets are transferred and they derive the value from India. That is like an indirect way of transferring something. This is an indirect transfer of something. Here also there is a transfer happening. An Indian company purchasing tangible assets, okay, in a foreign country and sells such assets. That's like outright selling after their value increases and transfers the proceeds to India. There is no indirect thing happening. This is very direct, that an Indian company buying something there like a building or an enterprise and they're selling it and transferring the proceeds. It's very direct. There is nothing indirect about it. But in this case, it's a whole different story because a foreign company is transferring only the shares and not the entire thing, not an entire asset, tangible or intangible asset, not the entire asset is being sold or anything, but only the transfer of shares is happening, and such shares derive substantial value, meaning that something that is not done directly, it's indirectly happening. Not that the asset is being sold right away and the proceed is transferred, just that the transfer of shares is happening. But the issue is that the shares is deriving value from an asset located in India. So that's a very indirect thing to do. This is very direct. So this is like a direct transfer. There is nothing indirect about it. This is very direct. Like this is very indirect and this is very direct. So after we have eliminated these two, I think among these two, this makes a much more probable case actually. So I am not 100% sure, but I'll be moving towards this because there is an element of indirect transfer happening. Actually, you won't be needing to do all of this if you actually knew what indirect transfer is. And there are concepts like base erosion, profit shifting, things like that. But I missed it. Sometimes you can also miss it, but it's fine. So this way you can actually arrive at the answer. So your thought process should be aligned in such a way that try to connect with the concepts you know, eliminate those options. This is basically profit erosion, base erosion, profit shifting. This is also similar to profit shifting, not indirect transfers. So I'll eliminate those two, and these two actually meaning there is a transfer happening, and this is a direct transfer from what I have understood. So I'll be eliminating that and then arriving at the answer. This was slightly tricky. It took some time for me to decipher, but eventually I was able to arrive at the answer because I knew something about base erosion and profit shifting. This is how having some idea about some concepts actually helps you in eliminating the options. Okay, so that's it. Answer is D. 8D. Moving on, next question. This is a very interesting thing. With reference to expenditure made by an organization or a company, which of the following statement is or are correct? Acquiring new technology is capital expenditure. Okay, we would have heard about few things. In budget also, there will be revenue receipts and revenue expenditure, capital expenditure and capital receipts. This is not directly connected to the government budgeting, but the base idea comes from there only. In economy, revenue expenditure meaning what? We are just giving money as salaries or a salary as maintenance, things like that, meaning that it's a recurring in nature and it doesn't really create any value. We are just giving something in return for their services. It's basically transactional. There is no investment as such is happening. What is the revenue? That is called a revenue expenditure. Revenue receipt means we are getting money. In case of revenue receipt is mostly in case of governments only, where they are getting taxes, fees, those sort of things, where they don't have to pay anything in return, directly in return, because there is no quid pro quo. So that's called a revenue receipt. But capital expenditure and capital receipts are two different things, and it's slightly on the slightly complicated concept, because capital expenditure meaning that you are actually spending money on something as an investment or to create an asset. Okay, but in case of revenue expenditure, no assets are created. It's like paying salaries. Don't overthink and assume that paying salary is like creating an asset or anything. Paying salary, that employee gets the salary, done. There is no future to that or anything. The transaction ends there. But at the same time, acquiring an asset actually has got a long-standing value, because the value appreciates, it becomes an asset, it gets added to our bank, like our asset market, and things like that are happening. So capital expenditure meaning acquiring new things, making investments, things like that. So it's basically for expansion. So capital expenditure, acquiring new technology is capital expenditure. Yes. Debt financing is considered capital expenditure, while equity financing is considered revenue expenditure. This is entirely wrong, because what is debt financing? We are borrowing money from somebody. If we are borrowing money from somebody, it's not capital expenditure, it's capital receipt only. It's the opposite. Capital expenditure meaning that we are investing money, we are creating assets or reducing our liability, things like that. We are paying back our debt or we are creating asset. That is called capital expenditure. Debt financing meaning that we are borrowing money, which is capital receipt only. So this is wrong. Equity financing is called revenue expenditure. No, it's not revenue expenditure. It is again, it's capital. Equity financing is also capital receipt. So that's it. The answer is A. So moving on, I'll explain few things about capital expenditure and revenue expenditures. So yeah, we'll be dealing with this in the perspective of government only, because that makes it more easy for you to understand. Also, this is connected to budget also. So what is capital receipt? Anything that creates liability or reduce asset, meaning that once we have to receive a capital asset, either we have to sell our belongings, sell our house or offices or any government properties, land or etc., so as to raise money. Disinvestment basically, or monetization, those are the things usually done for capital receipt, meaning that the asset is reduced. Or the other thing is borrowing. We borrow a loan from the market, so that's again increases our liability. These all adds to the capital receipt. Why are we doing this? We are doing this for either to reduce our liability or either to raise money at the cost of reducing asset or creating liability. Okay, we are raising money. That's the basic purpose for this, for capital receipt. And in case of capital expenditure, government is spending that money that creates an asset or reducing the liability. Spending that money meaning creating a road, a building, a bridge or anything, that's capital expenditure. Acquiring new technology, it's a capital expenditure. Or government is paying back the debt, not interest payments, paying back the actual debt that they have borrowed. Then what? The liability reduces, so it's a capital expenditure. So spending on technology, building roads, bridges, and paying back loans, the entire amount or the principal, that's actually capital expenditure. Remember, paying back the interest is not capital expenditure. It's in the revenue expenditure department. So that's an entirely different thing. So this is it. Basic relation: increasing liability, reducing asset. Asset and liability relations are inverse, and in capital receipt case, the liability increases, asset reduces, or both. So they are non-recurring because we are not frequently getting capital receipts or anything, because it's case by case. If situation arises, we'll be doing that. Otherwise, not. Then examples are like loans, disinvestments. The one thing about disinvestment is that it's a non-debt creating capital receipt, meaning that we are not selling PSUs, as in there is no debt created, but we are getting money. That's called non-debt creating capital receipt. Disinvestment is also one such thing. Recovery of loans from state. This is also a capital receipt. How come? This is very crucial, because sometimes people think that recovery of loans from states is a revenue receipt. But, well, it's not, because we are actually reducing our asset. Loan is an asset in economic terms. So if we are recovering loans, we are losing that asset. So recovery of loans is a part of capital receipt. Make that concept very clear. Okay. When you are recovering a loan, we are losing that product. As in, we are actually reducing the asset, or that asset as a loan is being reduced. So recovery of loans is actually capital receipt. Capital infusion, repayment of past loans. So repayment of loans are all capital expenditure. That you know that. Then revenue department. So revenue receipt, basically tax fees, fines, etc. The basic revenue for government. So there is no liability nor creating or reduction of asset. Government is getting money in exchange of services, but it's not really exchange of services. But government can get tax so as to to run the government, to run the economy, run the nation, etc. So there is no liability there. There is no asset there. There is nothing of that sort is there compared to capital receipt. Because in case of capital receipt, we have to give something in return. Either we have to sell our asset, or actually we have to borrow money, meaning we have to raise our liability. Here, nothing of that sort is there. It's recurring because it happens every year, every month, every week, depending upon the type of income they're using, customs income, GST, things like that. Basically taxes. Then dividends. This is another thing. Dividends are actually not part of capital receipts or capital expenditure. It's strictly revenue, because the amount of money that government has given us, loans, and the interest they are getting, it's part of the revenue receipts. Dividends means the money that they get in return for holding a particular stock or shares in any PSUs or any other company. Government spending that does not create assets or revenue expenditure, meaning that these, basically think about it like salaries only, salaries, subsidies, things like that. They don't have any direct relation, or they do not directly create profit, or they do not create or investment or anything. It's just that maintenance of economy. Here, very important, interest payment on government borrowings is revenue expenditure, not capital expenditure. Okay, make it very clear. Moving on. With reference to Indian economy, consider the following statement. A share of household financial savings goes towards government borrowings. Okay. Dated securities issued at market-related rates in auctions form a large component of internal debt. This can get slightly difficult if you haven't read about anything, or if you haven't read about small scale savings scheme. A share of household financial savings, meaning that normal household savings, how does that go towards government borrowing? You have to think about that. There is one instrument that multiple instruments that government uses. In that, there is a crucial thing. There are called small savings schemes, which the finance ministry fixes the interest rate, opposed to the normal savings schemes where bank interest rates are considered. But these small savings schemes are where people can actually invest money, or keep money as savings. They will get an interest usually higher than the normal interest rate. In return, those will be in post office saving banks, Kisan Vikas Patras, things like that, Suganya Samruddhi Yojana. So those financial savings accounts, the money goes directly to the government, unlike in the case of bank, where bank can utilize it. But here, that directly goes to the government, and it's a sort of debt financing by the government. In a way, government is actually borrowing money from the people and paying them in return through small saving schemes. So this is something that government directly does. that's how we can say that a share of household financial savings, because there are a lot of people who invest in post office savings banks, Suganya Samriddhi Yojana, Kisan Vikas Patras, things like that. So that directly goes to government borrowings, because they have to pay, government has to pay that money in return when the maturity hits or when the deposit is matured. So obviously it's a part of government borrowing. This is true. But you need to have an idea about small saving schemes to get this thing right. Then dated securities issued at market related in auctions form a large component of internal debt. It's slightly on the factual side. You need to know major components of internal and external debt in terms of currency and the major component as such. That's slightly on the factual side, but this is something most of the aspirants will know, especially in the economic survey. There will be the debt components mentioned. So this is directly from the economic survey. I don't think this changes, because data securities will be forming the large component. I don't think it changes often, but still go through the economic survey debt component, and where money comes and where money goes. Header, money comes and money goes. This is an important area in economic survey summary. You will get that in the summary. Look through this portion. This really helps you get an idea about where is government raising money, which forms the large component of government's revenue receipts or capital receipts, things like that, and also where the expenditure is going. So you will get an idea about that. This is where you should be referring. Economic survey. Just you don't have to go through the entire economic survey. Especially go through this part. Okay, this really helps. So these are the basic small savings schemes in India. Post office savings bank. I think most of you will be having a post office account. Most people will be having that, and you know that the interest rate is slightly on the higher side, so as to attract them away from the normal conventional banking schemes. So public provident fund, PPF is also another thing. National savings certificate, senior citizen savings certificate, Suganya Samriddhi Yojana for education as well as marriage of girl child, Kisan Vikas Patras, Atal Pension Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Vaya Vandana Yojana. These are like income pension type schemes. They are paying money for a certain time, and after that particular age they will be getting as pension. So this is how government can actually borrow money from people. At the same time, people also benefits from that. So these are the kind of small saving schemes government offers, and government is essentially borrowing money from people. So these are the few things you need to know. Questions can be asked like about these sort of schemes, and it will be, if you don't know about small saving schemes, this can get slightly confusing, as in how does this actually goes to government borrowings or anything. How is government borrowing money? This is basically investment, things like that. Basically the money they are giving goes to the government borrowings, and government will be using that money for other purposes, and they will be paid back that money once the maturity hits. So this is the current status of government's internal debt. Dated securities are like 70 to 80% of government borrowings. They are G securities, meaning that they are long-term bonds. That's the thing. These opposed to treasury bills, which are less than up to less than 1 year. G securities are like long-term bonds with maturities about 5 to 40 years. It can go up to that. Usually it's 10 years, but it can go between 5 to 40 years. They form the largest component. You can imagine that also, because G securities, government is raising money from G securities only. So that's the major debt component of the government. Then treasury bills, securities. See, this is what we have been saying. Borrowings against small savings schemes. Those things are directly from the household, because the normal people are investing in that, not investors or other portfolio managers or anything. Normal people are investing in these. So it's directly from the household. It accounts for about 10 to 15%. It's much lesser than treasury bills actually. Compared to this, dated security is like the largest component. Almost 80% is there. This is a rough figure. I don't know exactly, but usually this is the ballpark. You need to update this with current economic survey. Okay, if you're writing 2026 prelims, go through the 2026 economic survey and update this information. I'm just giving you an idea roughly what would be the amount. These are not exact amount, and even if you add up this will be more than 100. So that's there. So other borrowings like ways and means advances. This is, I hope you know what is ways and means advances. Then cash management bills, minor instruments. You need to know what are WMAs and CMBs. You need to know about that. Then moving on. In India, credit rating agencies are regulated by Reserve Bank of India. Okay, in the credit rating agency, popularly known as ICRA, is a public limited company. Brickworks Rating is an Indian credit rating agency. Right off the bat, most aspirants won't be knowing anything about Brickworks, and this ICRA, even the name ICRA wouldn't be known for most of the aspirants, let alone knowing that it's a public limited company. So these two statements are extremely difficult and factual. Good that if you have come across this and you know that, okay, it's an Indian credit rating company or the ICRA is a public limited company. But here is the catch. Credit rating, you might think that credit rating is the domain of RBI. But in reality, whenever a question comes where RBI is mentioned as an agency that is regulating, overseeing or doing something, think about an agency that could replace RBI. In most scenarios, where RBI is given and if SEBI seems very probable, there is a good chance that SEBI would be the answer and it has just been changed to RBI. Okay, and vice versa. If SEBI is given and if you think that RBI could be make sense in that scenario, then RBI could be the answer. Don't take this as a hardcore logic, but have an idea that this is a possible scenario, because so UPSC has repeated this theme where it will be giving RBI in place of SEBI and vice versa. But this is the most common pattern where RBI is given instead of SEBI, not the other way around. That's not very common, but this is very common. And if you have an idea about economy, you obviously know that credit rating agencies are mostly credit rating agencies are done by the securities commissions of respective countries. For example, it's SEC in USA and SEBI in India. It's not a domain of the federal bank or the Reserve Bank of a country. So that's not what the Reserve Bank of country does. Credit rating is majorly regulated by the securities commissions of respective countries. In India, it's SEBI. In USA, it's SEC, not RBI. Okay. Another question is the rating agency popularly known as ICRA is not a public limited company. We don't know that. But only thing that needs to be known is it's not RBI, it's SEBI. So we'll be able to arrive at the answer. These sort of things are not very relevant. Okay, credit rating agency, the rating agency is a public limited company. Brickwork Rating is an Indian credit rating agency. There are a lot of credit rating agencies. You must have heard about Moody's, then JP Morgan. They are all credit rating agencies. They are private, and for the case of ICRA, it's a public limited company. They rate credit based on they give AAA, AA ratings to assess the credit quality or the rating of those shares, stocks or companies for that matter. So this has recently popped up in the case of Adani Hindenburg issue, where credit rating agencies have actually raised concerns about giving good credit rating to Adani, and they have accused, and it has not been clear, but those sort of things have happened. So questions like that can come. But just have an idea that credit rating is something that is done by the securities board of that respective country. In case of India, it's SEBI. So that's it. We arrive at the answer. UPSC is not necessarily picking upon these details, as in whether you know that ICRA is a public company or not. It's not very relevant, but have an idea about that. But one thing that is very much connected to this scenario is, I think I've put about that. Yeah, in the next question I'll show you. Banks Board Bureau. This is not very relevant in this day and age, because this was very peak in 2019 to 2021 when the NPA crisis was in its peak. So then there was insolvency, bankruptcy code, things like that were there. Then Banks Board Bureau was constituted. So it was in news back then. Governor of RBI is the chairman of Banks Board Bureau. Okay. Banks Board Bureau recommends for the selection of heads of public sector banks. This makes sense. This was actually a current affair where there is little logic, where you could, you can actually use very little logic here, but we'll try to do that. They recommend selection of heads. Makes sense. This, not sure. Banks Board Bureau helps the public sector bank in developing strategies and capital raising plans. Again, little factual. But the only thing we could be sure about is that Banks Board Bureau, okay, RBI, the governor of RBI rarely chairs committees or boards outside the monetary policy committee. Other than that, we hear little references about governor of RBI being chairman of any body as such. He'll be a member in many bodies, but chairman of monetary policy committee. Other than that, there is very little I have heard about RBI governor being chairman of any body. Especially this Banks Board Bureau was in news, and definitely governor of RBI was not there. This is something appointed by the government, most likely will be appointed by the government, or an executive action by the government or anything. It's most likely like that. So this is very less likely. Also, if this statement was given like governor of RBI is the chairman of Banks Board Bureau, there will be a reference of like ex officio chairman. Okay, because this is another body, and governor of RBI, because he or she is the governor, becomes the chairman of this board. So if governor of RBI is the chairman, there is a good chance that it should be mentioned as ex officio. Okay, because they won't be directly chairman, because they will be chairman because they are governor of RBI. So since the ex officio is missing, and there is a very unlikely chance that governor of RBI is heading such a body, I actually chose to eliminate it. This was my logic, because there is no ex officio given, and I haven't heard about any other body where RBI governor is the chairman. So I eliminated that, and luckily that all was needed back then. So I arrived at the answer as B. But even if this question comes, you will be able to solve it, because Banks Board Bureau, they actually recommends for selection of public sector banks, heads of public sector banks, and they actually develop strategy. This is basically in the backdrop of NPA crisis. This body was constituted. Now this body has been replaced by Financial Services Institutions Bureau. This is important. Right now, Banks Board Bureau is being replaced due to some controversies regarding their appointments and things like that. It has been replaced by FSIB. Okay, and remember, Appointments Committee of Cabinet headed by the Prime Minister approves the final appointment of chairman of Banks Board Bureau, and they recommends the selection of heads of public sector banks. So that's all you need to know about that. And remember, this has been replaced by FSIB, and if anything related to FSIB comes in the news, just keep a note of that. And remember, it's Appointment Committee of Cabinet. If you remember clearly, last day also we have discussed something related to this, that the Appointment of Committee of Cabinet appoints. So keep an eye on that, where the Appointments Committee of Cabinet appoints who all are the members or the chairpersons who are appointed by the ACC. Just keep an eye on that, because mostly it would be either an executive action, or it will be president will be appointing. RBI governor is also appointed by the Appointments Committee of the Cabinet. This is another thing. Yeah, I was saying about that NPA crisis. Back then, NPA crisis was very much in news. Right now, what is in news is bad banks. Bad banks are the ones, government has mooted the idea of bad banks, and they have constituted two publicly limited companies for that matter. So bad banks are the ones that actually purchases the NPAs from the banks and then restructure it and sell it. As in, the loans they get, they will be restructuring the loans, and then they will be selling those loans. So this way, banks can actually clear their balance sheets and move forward. And all the hassle related to loan recovery, the liquidation, everything, reconstruction, selling of those things will be handled by these bad banks. They generate a profit based on selling, auctioning, bidding, things like that of those particular assets. Banks can get instant settlement, and they can clear their balance sheets. So it's the headaches of banks are gone, and that will be taken by bad banks. They have been dedicatedly in place for dealing with these NPAs. So these are the things. There are two bodies associated with this. That is National Asset Reconstruction Company Limited. It's a public limited company. They do that. That's a bad bank. They buy NPAs from commercial banks. And there is another body, India Debt Resolution Company Limited, which actually this manages the acquired loans. Basically, the acquired loans are liquidated or auctioned or put to bidding. Things like that are done by the IDRCL, and NARCL actually acquires these loans. So these two work together for debt resolution. Basic idea, like I said, is improve their balance sheet, reduce the risk for future loan defaults. Because once these bad banks are in place, and banks get an idea that okay, there is a bad bank in place and government is monitoring this, and the difficulty within which it is get to resolve, banks will be more cautious to lend loans that have got similar criteria, similar condition, or even similar borrowers. So that's the basic thing, to reduce the future default and as well as to clear the balance sheets. So that's the idea of bad banks, and currently we have 2 bad banks and they are public limited companies. Also, I have an idea that functions of NIRCL is just to accurate, IDRCL does with actual reconstruction and debt resolution. Moving on, we have discussed this question multiple times, as in it's very basic and it's entirely logical only. As there is an option to exchange the bond for equity, convertible bonds pay a lower rate of interest. Question is convertible bonds, meaning that it's different from conventional bond. There is an element of convertibility to that. Okay, and we don't know what exactly is the convertibility, but it's different from conventional bond. So it's a special type of bond, obviously. And as there is an option to exchange the bond for equity, convertible bonds pay a lower rate of interest. Okay, again, basic thing, risk reward. Having an option, meaning that reduced risk, meaning that reduced reward. So convertible bonds pay a lower rate of interest. Makes perfect sense. Okay, so everything about this statement makes perfect sense. The option to convert to equity affords the bondholder a degree of indexation to rising consumer prices. Exactly. I've given you an example also when we have discussed this in the outlier series, that option to convert to equity. For example, if I am holding a bond in Reliance for that matter, and it's 100 rupee, and I have an option. The bond actually pays me roughly 7% as coupon rate, meaning that I'll be getting around 7 rupees annually. Okay, it's a hypothetical scenario, 7 rupees annually, but the rising inflation is more than that 7%. For example, if the inflation rate is 10%, that doesn't make any much sense for me to hold that bond. But if it's a convertible bond, I could do one thing. I could actually convert that bond, the 100 rupee bond, into a Reliance share, and this Reliance share will be going up because of inflation, because inflation actually fuels economic growth, and thereby the stock prices will most likely be going high. There is a level of risk to that also, but there is a good chance that the stock prices will be going high due to inflation and higher rate of economic growth, economic activity in the market. So that kind of protects me. That option kind of protects me from having the risk of inflation overriding my coupon rate. So this is actually a right one. So both of these statements actually make sense. So there is no real reason to doubt it. Everything makes perfect sense. Basic risk reward. So it's right. So that's the answer. Moving on. Next question. In India, which of the following is responsible for maintaining price stability by controlling inflation? Those who have had a basic economic understanding will right away know the answer. There will be no doubt about it. But the issue is that this is one question where you overthink. That maintaining price stability by controlling inflation. You might think that, okay, inflation control, okay. Inflation meaning rising prices, and it's always government that is being blamed for the rising prices and things like that. So we'll be like, okay, Expenditure Management Committee, Financial Stability Development Council, Department of Consumer Affairs. It's basic thing. It's RBI, and or more clearly, it's MPC. Monetary Policy Committee is responsible for maintaining price stability by controlling inflation. And last day also we discussed what kind of inflation is being controlled by maintaining price stability. It's demand side. RBI controls the demand side of things. Okay, and government controls the supply side or cost push inflation. RBI controls the demand pull inflation. So have a good idea about that. Demand pull inflation by RBI, cost push inflation controlled by the government. And in the last class also I have given you a comparison between what is cost push inflation and demand pull inflation. Be very clear about that. Okay, that's one thing you need to have a good understanding about, and that helps you in eliminating the answers and arriving at the answer. Again, this FSDC is an important body. The questions has been asked about this. Nothing much have been asked about these two bodies. So this is basically regarding expenditure management. It has nothing to do with inflation. It's just an executive body. So read about this FSDC. This actually helps. Okay, also and Reserve Bank of India, MPC. More accurately, it's Monetary Policy Committee that is responsible for maintaining price stability by controlling inflation. So that's about it, and I hope you are getting the hang of economy. The way I explain things is like, you don't have to rely too much on knowledge, but build your basic concepts right, so that you don't struggle with remembering things and overcomplicating things. Economy can get complicated if you think too much. Just think about it in very basic sense, like risk reward, supply demand, bond price going high, inflation, government securities buying and selling. Think about it in very basic sense. Then it will be much easier for you to actually utilize your knowledge, apply your knowledge. Otherwise it will be very difficult for you to even read and comprehend in the heat of the examination, and you can mark questions wrong. That's where this economy part gets difficult. A structured learning in a simplified format with revision material with one liner note can really help you cement your conceptual understanding. Stick to the series and you will be able to grasp more. I'll be taking dedicated economy session based on these concepts, and I'll be using Gallant test for that matter, and try to follow Gallant test economy series. Actually the Gallant series is really good. We have been framing questions in such a way that it's very much in conceptual terms, and we are not purposefully trying to make it difficult or anything. We are making questions in such a way that it actually reflects the quality of the reflects the standard that UPSC holds. So we are trying our best to match that level and to mimic or simulate that experience for you to best perform in the examination. So that's it. All the best and see you soon.